Sunday dinner at the Harrison family table. Sunday dinner at the Harrison family table had always been a tradition, but lately, it felt more like a tribunal. Every week, I sat in the same chair I'd occupied since childhood, watching my family dissect every choice I'd made with the precision of surgeons and the compassion of vultures. As my sister Catherine began cutting her roast beef with deliberate precision, she said, "I heard you turned down another job offer this week. I should have known this would come up." In a family where everyone made it their business to know everyone else's business, privacy was a luxury I'd never been allowed. "It wasn't the right fit," I said simply, taking a sip of water and hoping the conversation would move on. "The right fit?" My brother Michael laughed, the sound sharp and mocking. "Jessica, you've turned down 6 job offers in the past 4 months. At what point do you stop being picky and start being realistic?" "Maybe when the offers are worth taking," I replied, keeping my voice level despite the irritation building in my chest. My father set down his fork with a loud clank that made everyone at the table look up. "Worth taking? Jessica, you're 31 years old. You live in a studio apartment that's barely bigger than our walk-in closet. You drive a car that's older than some of our neighbors' children. What exactly are you holding out for?" "Something that aligns with my values," I said quietly. The table erupted in laughter, not warm, familial laughter, but the cruel kind that cuts deep and leaves scars. "Your values?" Catherine wiped tears from her eyes. "What values?" "The value of being unemployed. The value of disappointing everyone who cares about you." "I'm not unemployed," I protested. "I freelance. I write content for." "You write blog posts about cat food," Michael interrupted. "That's not a career, Jessica. That's what college students do for beer money." Mom, who had been silent up to this point, finally spoke. Her voice was calm, measured, and somehow more devastating than all the shouting and mockery combined. "Jessica," she said, looking directly at me with the same expression she wore when I was 7 and broke her favorite vase. "We've been patient with you. We've supported your decisions even when we didn't understand them. We've made excuses for you, to our friends, our neighbors, our colleagues." "I never asked you to make excuses for me," I said. "No, you didn't ask," Dad agreed. "But we did it anyway. Because that's what family does. We protect each other, even when one of us is making choices that reflect poorly on the rest of us." The words hung in the air like smoke, acidic and suffocating. "But our patience has limits," Mom continued. "And frankly, we're tired of being embarrassed by you." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This conversation felt different from the usual criticism and disappointment. This felt final. "What are you saying?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. Catherine and Michael exchanged a look that told me they'd discussed this beforehand. This wasn't a spontaneous family intervention. This was a planned execution. "We're saying that we can't continue to associate with someone who refuses to live up to their potential," Catherine said. "It's affecting our reputations, our business relationships, our social standing." "Your social standing?" I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my voice. "Yes," Michael said firmly. "Do you know how embarrassing it is to tell people that my sister is a 31-year-old freelance blogger? Do you know what that does to my credibility as a financial advisor? And I'm trying to make partner at my law firm," Catherine added. "Having a sister who lives like a college student doesn't exactly project the kind of stability and success they're looking for." I looked around the table at these people I'd grown up with, shared holidays with, called family for over 3 decades. They were looking at me like I was a stain they needed to scrub out of their carefully curated lives. "So what?" I asked. "You want me to take any job, regardless of whether it makes me miserable, just so you can feel better about yourselves at cocktail parties?" "We want you to grow up," Dad said bluntly. "We want you to stop pretending that your principles are more important than your responsibilities." "What responsibilities?" I asked. "I pay my own bills. I take care of myself. I don't owe any of you anything." "You owe us the courtesy of not embarrassing us," Mom said. "You owe us the respect of at least trying to be successful." "I am successful," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "I'm doing work I believe in, work that makes a difference." "Writing about cat food makes a difference?" Michael scoffed. "I don't just write about cat food," I snapped. "I write about sustainable living, ethical consumerism, social justice." "Topics that don't pay the bills," Catherine interrupted. Topics that don't build careers or create stability. Stability isn't everything, I said. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone stopped eating, stopped moving, stopped breathing. Mom's face had gone pale and Dad's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. Stability isn't everything, Mom repeated slowly as if she couldn't believe what she'd heard. Jessica, Dad said, his voice dangerously quiet. Your mother and I have worked our entire lives to build stability for this family. We've sacrificed. We've saved. We've planned. We've built something meaningful. And you sit there and tell us that none of that matters? That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said, Catherine cut in. You just told us that everything we've worked for, everything we've built, everything we value is meaningless to you, because you value the wrong things. I value the wrong things, I repeated and immediately regretted it. The explosion was immediate and devastating. The wrong things. Dad roared, standing up so fast his chair fell backward. We value hard work, responsibility, contributing to society, building something lasting. What exactly is wrong with that? You value appearances more than authenticity, I shot back, rising to meet his anger with my own. You care more about what other people think than about what actually matters. What actually matters? Mom's voice was ice cold now. Jessica, what actually matters to you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like nothing matters to you. Not your family, not your future, not your responsibilities. That's not true, I said, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. Isn't it? Michael leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. When was the last time you came to one of my client events to support my business? When was the last time you helped Catherine network at one of her firm's functions? When was the last time you did anything to contribute to this family's success instead of dragging it down? I opened my mouth to respond, but realized I didn't have an answer. Not because I hadn't done those things, but because I'd stopped being invited to do them years ago. We've given you every opportunity, Mom said, her voice steady, but her hands shook slightly as she reached for her wine glass. Every connection, every recommendation, every chance to prove you could be the daughter we raised you to be. And you've thrown it all away, Catherine added. Every single opportunity wasted. Because they weren't opportunities, I said desperately. They were chances for me to become someone I'm not. To live a life that would make me miserable. Miserable? Dad let out a bitter laugh. You think having a stable job, a nice house, and a respectable life would make you miserable? Do you know what actually makes people miserable, Jessica? Poverty. Instability. Watching your family be ashamed of you. The words hit like blows, each one landing precisely where I was already hurting. You're ashamed of me, I said quietly. It wasn't a question. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. It stretched between us, filled with 31 years of disappointment and unmet expectations. Finally, Mom spoke. You're officially dead to this family. Her voice was calm. Final. She picked up her fork and took another bite of roast beef as if she'd just commented on the weather. Everyone else nodded and continued eating like they hadn't just delivered my execution. I sat there in shock, watching my family calmly finish their dinner. The normalcy of it was somehow more devastating than if they'd screamed and thrown things. Catherine asked Michael about his vacation plans. Dad commented on the wine. Mom complimented herself on the roast seasoning. They chatted and laughed and acted like I wasn't even there, like I had already ceased to exist. Out of habit more than anything, I glanced at my phone. That's when I saw the notification that changed everything. Congratulations. Your article, The Hidden Environmental Cost of Fast Fashion, has been selected as a finalist for the National Environmental Journalism Award. The winner will be announced at tomorrow's ceremony. Please confirm your attendance. I read it 3 times just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. The National Environmental Journalism Award was one of the most prestigious honors in my field. The prize included a $50,000 grant and guaranteed publication opportunities with major magazines and newspapers. I'd submitted that article 6 months ago and honestly forgotten about it. It had taken 3 months of research, interviewing factory workers, fashion executives, and environmental scientists. I traced the journey of a single t-shirt from cotton field to landfill, exposing the devastating human and environmental cost of cheap clothing. It was the exact kind of work my family dismissed as meaningless. I slipped my phone back into my purse without saying a word. Let them finish their dinner. Let them feel righteous for cutting me out of their lives. Tomorrow they'd understand exactly what they'd thrown away. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced conversation and deliberate exclusion. When it was time to leave, no one said goodbye. No one walked me to the door. I might as well have been invisible. Back in my studio apartment, the one they always mocked for being barely bigger than a closet, I poured a glass of wine and spent the night researching what to wear to an awards ceremony I never thought I'd attend. The next morning I put on my best dress, a simple black number I'd originally bought for job interviews, and took an Uber to the Marriott downtown. The ceremony was being held in their largest ballroom, and when I arrived I was stunned by the scale of it. Hundreds of journalists, editors, publishers, and media executives filled the room. I recognized faces from television, names from bylines I'd read in major publications. People whose work I'd admired for years. And somehow, impossibly, I was here among them. The ceremony opened with awards for various achievements in environmental journalism. I sat in the back, heart pounding. Finally, they reached my category. The award for outstanding environmental investigation goes to. The presenter opened the envelope with dramatic flair. Jessica Harrison, for her article The Hidden Environmental Cost of Fast Fashion. I think I stopped breathing. The room erupted in applause as I made my way to the stage, my legs numb and trembling. The award was heavier than I expected, a beautiful crystal structure that threw rainbows across the stage lights. "Ms. Harrison," the presenter said, smiling, "would you like to say a few words?" I looked out at the crowd of professionals, all applauding my work, and felt something shift inside me. "Thank you," I began, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "This article took 3 months of research, dozens of interviews, and countless hours of writing. But more than that, it represents the power of journalism to expose truths that powerful people would rather keep hidden." The applause grew louder. When I started this investigation, people told me fashion journalism wasn't serious. That environmental reporting didn't matter. That I was wasting my time on topics that didn't pay the bills. I paused. But sometimes the work that matters most is the work that other people don't understand. After the ceremony, I was approached by editors from 3 major publications, 2 documentary filmmakers, and a literary agent interested in a book deal. Business cards were exchanged. Meetings were scheduled. My freelance career, once the butt of every family joke, was transforming before my eyes. By the time I got home that evening, my phone was buzzing non-stop. Congratulations from colleagues, interview requests from journalists, and social media notifications. The news of my award was spreading through journalism circles faster than I could keep up. But the most interesting messages were the ones from my family. "At 7:30 p.m. Catherine. Saw the news about your award. Congratulations." "At 8:15 p.m. Michael. Mom told me about the journalism thing. That's actually pretty cool." "At 9:45 p.m. Mom. Jessica, we need to talk. Can you call me?" "At 10:20 p.m. Dad. Saw your name in the newspaper. We should discuss this." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I poured another glass of wine, sat on my couch in my tiny apartment, and looked at the award, thinking about how much my life had changed in just 24 hours. The next morning, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find my entire family standing in the hallway, awkward, uncomfortable, and clearly rehearsed. "Jessica," Mom began, "we think there may have been a misunderstanding yesterday." "A misunderstanding?" I repeated. "We had no idea you were working on such important projects," Catherine jumped in. "If we'd known." "You would have what?" I cut her off. "Treated me differently? Respected my choices? Not declared me dead to the family?" Dad cleared his throat. "We may have been hasty in our judgment." "Hasty?" I said. "That's one way to put it." Michael shifted uncomfortably. "The thing is, this award you won. It's kind of a big deal, isn't it?" "It's the most prestigious award in environmental journalism," I replied matter-of-factly. "And the prize money," Mom began. $50,000, I confirmed. "Plus guaranteed publication opportunities with major magazines and newspapers." Silence. They looked at me, processing this new version of the daughter they thought they knew. Finally, Dad spoke. "Jessica, we owe you an apology." "Do you?" I asked. And I let the question hang there in the silence they were finally willing to sit with. "Because yesterday," I said calmly, You made it very clear that my work didn't matter, that my values were wrong, and that I was an embarrassment to this family. We didn't understand, Catherine began. You didn't try to understand, I interrupted. For years, you've dismissed my work without ever asking what I actually do, what my goals are, or what I'm trying to accomplish. You write about cat food, Michael said weakly. I almost laughed. I wrote one article about sustainable pet food manufacturing, I corrected. One article, out of hundreds. But of course that's the only one you ever bothered to remember because it fit the narrative you'd created about my life. Mom stepped forward. We want to make this right. How? I asked. How do you make right years of treating me like a failure? How do you take back telling me I was dead to you? How do you undo dismissing everything I care about? We could celebrate, Catherine offered tentatively. Have a family dinner to honor your achievement. I almost laughed again. You want to throw me a party now? Now that my work has been validated by people you consider important. Jessica, please, Dad said. And for the first time in my adult life I heard him sound desperate. We made a mistake. We judged you unfairly. We want to fix this. I looked at these people. My family, who had spent years making me feel small, who had questioned every decision I made, who valued their social standing more than my happiness. Here's what's going to happen, I said. I'm going to continue doing the work I believe in, writing about the topics that matter to me and living according to my own values. If you can respect that, if you can support me even when you don't understand what I'm doing, then we can rebuild our relationship. Of course, Mom said quickly. We want to support you. But if you go back to treating me like a disappointment the moment the spotlight moves on, if my work only matters when other people say it matters, then we're done. Permanently this time. They all nodded, promising to do better, to listen more, to respect my choices. But I saw it in their eyes, the calculation. The way they were already figuring out how to leverage my success for their own social benefit. Over the next few weeks I watched them try. Catherine casually mentioned my award to her law firm partners. Michael brought it up to his clients. Mom and Dad bragged to their neighbors about their award-winning journalist daughter. But they still didn't read my articles. They didn't try to understand my work. They cared about the recognition, not the writing. The appearance of success, not the purpose behind it. 3 months later, when the media attention faded and I returned to my regular freelance routine, their support began to waver. Catherine stopped bringing up my work at her firm. Michael went back to cracking jokes about my career at family gatherings. Mom and Dad returned to their subtle suggestions that I should consider something more stable. The only difference? Now they tacked on, of course we're very proud of your award, at the end of their criticisms, like that somehow made their disappointment more palatable. That's when I realized, nothing had really changed. They still didn't value me for who I was. They valued how I made them look. So I made a decision. I used the connections I'd gained through the award to land a staff position at a major environmental magazine. The job came with a significant salary bump, excellent benefits, and the chance to work on investigations that could make a real impact. The best part? It was based in Portland, Oregon, 3,000 miles away from Sunday dinners, where my worth was measured by other people's opinions and my success only mattered when it reflected well on the family name. I moved without telling them. When I finally called to let them know, the reaction was predictable. You moved across the country without discussing it with us? Mom's voice was sharp, hurt and angry. I'm 31 years old, I reminded her. I don't need permission to move. But what about family dinners? Catherine asked. What about staying connected? We can stay connected, I said. But on different terms. I'm not going to spend every week defending my life choices to people who only support me when it benefits them. The conversations that followed were difficult, full of accusations, hurt feelings, and awkward silences. But slowly something changed. Without the weekly scrutiny, without the constant pressure to perform or defend myself, I was able to have real conversations with my family. We talked about things other than my career. Other than their disappointment. We found that we had things in common. Interests, perspectives, even jokes, beyond shared DNA and childhood memories. Catherine called after reading one of my articles about corporate environmental responsibility. I had no idea companies were doing that, she said. This is actually really important work. Michael texted me after I published an investigation into sustainable investing. My clients are starting to ask about this stuff. Can we talk sometime about what you've learned? Even mom and dad began reading my articles, not to brag but because they were actually interested. The distance gave us space to see each other clearly, maybe for the first time. 2 years later, I won a Pulitzer Prize for a series exposing corruption in the EPA. And this time their reaction was different. They didn't immediately post about it online. They didn't lead with it at parties. They called. And they said, "Jessica, we are so proud of the work you've done. We think your reporting is making a difference. We finally understand why you care so much about what you do." And for the first time in my adult life, I believed they meant it. The tiny studio apartment they once mocked? It's now a lovely one-bedroom in Portland's Pearl District. The old car they called embarrassingly outdated? Replaced with a hybrid that fits my budget and my values. The career they dismissed as not serious? It's become a source of meaningful work, personal fulfillment, and financial independence. But the most important transformation wasn't professional. It was personal. I learned that family doesn't have to be a prison. It can be a bridge. If both sides are willing to meet in the middle. Sometimes you have to be declared dead before you can come alive. Sometimes, rejection is the only thing that clears the path to becoming who you were always meant to be. And sometimes, the notification that changes your entire life is sitting right there on your phone, waiting for you to be pushed just far enough away from the table to finally see it.